bird is teaching much better than I could. I'm sure they got it wrong when they say that St. Francis was preaching to the birds. Of course he was listening to the birds. They don't need preaching to. Such a divine sound and such a wonderful, exquisite balance between stillness and sound. That bird knows about balance. There's always quite a long gap. And then the next sound comes out of the stillness, and it's always fresh and new. It's never a repetition of the previous sound with this bird. This is why it's so amazing. And that would be enough. If you had that around as your teacher, what else do you need? The bird is teaching the balance between form and formless. That's the art of living. To live in both dimensions, sound and stillness, form and formless, things and no-thingness. In this teaching, the dimension of stillness, of the formless, is emphasized because the entire civilization is lost in form, in things, in objects, in thoughts. The entire civilization is lost in that dimension of things. That includes thoughts. And that's why there is a particular emphasis in this teaching on that which is missing. Balance needs to re-establish itself because no civilization can survive without the balance between form and formless. Now, everybody has form already, more than enough. That's why this teaching isn't based on knowledge or new facts, interesting facts, new information. And because the world is full of that. I mean, you can push any button of the many devices that you have, and you get information. And you're drowning in information. And ultimately you see what is the point of it all? If that's just more of that, is that going to save the world? More information or more things? Are we going to find the fullness of life through more things and greater and bigger shopping malls? Again, form. Or are we going to find ourselves through improving our ability to think and analyze and solve problems analytically that were created by excessive thinking in the first place? Or as Carl Jung put it, you cannot solve a problem on the same level of consciousness that created the problem. And so what created the problem of our civilization is that humans lost touch with the formless dimension, which we could also call spirit, which we could call the sacred, which we could call, if that word had not been misused so much, we could call God, but we won't call it that. And Jesus said, what does it profit you if you gain the whole world and lose yourself or your soul? That's really, he could already see the tendency where things were going. And the form also includes time. So we cannot deny that time has or seems to be real on the surface of life, because it's everywhere. As far as forms are concerned, time seems to do something to the forms, the life forms. And it's strange, it gradually grinds the forms down, it erodes the forms, it does something to them. Some people have even looked upon time as some dreadful illness that inflicts everybody, and that's one way of looking at it. Everybody is suffering from a lethal disease. The outcome is the end of the form. It's just a question of when. And so you see it, as my father says, who is 87 now, he says, mirrors are not the same quality they used to be. So the art is to live in this world where time seems, on the one hand, to be everywhere and control everything, but where, on the other hand, time is also recognized as ultimately an illusion, because if you look more deeply, there is no time, there's only ever this moment. And therefore, that is the portal into the formless dimension. It's the narrow gate that Jesus talks about that leads to life. The narrow gate that leads to life. Yes, it's very narrow, it's only this. To find it, and Jesus says there are not many who find it, to find it, you need to roll up the scroll of your life on which your story is written, past, future, very unclear, you can't quite figure out what's it all about. And you roll up, people usually live carrying a burden, some more than others, but every carrying the burden of past, me, my history, and how I'm hoping or fearing it's going which way it's going. Hope, fear. So you have this, okay, you're walking with myself, that's the self, the form-based, mind-based, time-based self. And that has a heaviness to it. And the more you carry of time, of past and future, and think about it and talk about it and refer to as your sense of identity, gives you your sense of self, things that happened in the past, and future, hoping to find yourself, we talked about it. And then you're lost in form, because all these are thought forms. Time and form go together. So you need to roll up, you know these old scrolls, you had to roll them, before there were books, you had scrolls, you rolled them, and you can... There's a beautiful story of a vision that the woman who wrote the Course in Miracles, that came to her as an inner voice, before the whole dictation started, she had a vision in which she found a scroll in an old box, a very ancient scroll. And as she started to unroll the scroll, she saw symbols on the left and other symbols on the right. And she heard a voice saying, if you read what's on the left, you know the past. And if you read what is on the right, you'll know the future. And she looked to the left and the right, and then she rolled it back to the central panel, on which was written, God is. And she said, this is all that I'm interested in. I don't want anything else. That's all I want. God is. And then the same voice that had explained to her that is past and that is future said, congratulations, you made it this time. So her focal point had become the present moment. If her focal point had not become the present moment, the spaciousness that was necessary for the wisdom to come through her out of the formless, it was then given form by her mind, but the spaciousness would not have been there. If she had said, okay, that's interesting, let's see, I'm going to look at the future. And then years later she would still be looking at oh wow. And the past is interesting too. And God is the isness of now. Just that. And this is, you can use that as an image for your own life. As much as possible, be interested in this. And that is what we called getting out of the stream of the continuity between past and future as often as possible. Break that, make space, as if you had a veil, and you say, this is the veil of my life, in which things are written, this is the fabric, and then you go in there and separate it. Oh. And then you put your head through into another dimension, the way you see it in some of these films of magic. And that is, the awakening into now. And as we are transitional humans at this evolutionary stage for humanity, many humans alive now are transitional beings. They are dysfunctional as they're manifestations of the old consciousness. They are becoming more and more dysfunctional because the old consciousness that is totally identified with mind, form and time, that's been running human history for thousands of years, is reaching the end of its lifespan. It cannot survive much longer. And so every human being carries the old also still inside. And many humans, and certainly those present here and many others, are transitional beings in the sense that the old still has a momentum within them as the new is arising. I call it new because ultimately it's timeless, it's not new, there's no time at all, but it's, let's say, as I saw the name of one second-hand shop was called New to You. So no words can really ever express the exact truth. So you have to be allow for the fact that language is never quite right, and especially is never quite right when you begin to speak of spiritual truth, the formless, because every word is form, and ultimately can only function by reflecting something in the world of form, and then it becomes difficult when the language is used to express something that is beyond form. And that's why Jesus used parables, and he never said, this is the kingdom of heaven. He said, the kingdom of heaven is like, or it's a little bit like that, or like that. And he gives you little stories. And then the form of the words, as long as you don't get entangled in the words and say, oh, this is how it is. If you allow the words to be pointers, little signposts, then it can work. But if you say, there's the truth, it's not. The truth is not in the word. And especially in spiritual discourse, the truth is that to which the word points. So you have to look beyond the words, especially here. And so we learn to bring a balance into our lives between time and timelessness, between the world of things, handling that, situations, things, objects, and not getting lost in things, in the world of things, in the world of situations, in the world. Not losing yourself in the world. And that world includes, is not only the external world, but also the world that you carry as the mind-made world in the head, because that one creates that one. The human-made world, the so-called external human-made world, and the inner state of consciousness are, of course, one continuum. The outer only reflects the inner. And so on the outer level, for example, we have a civilization that is extraordinarily noisy. If somebody came from some past civilization, even 200 years back, 1,000 years back, and would arrive here in a city or even in a small town, they would say, what is going on? This deafening noise everywhere, and the machines everywhere that make noise. Have I arrived in the hell realm? And if they don't have the noises that are produced by machines, they have to make noise, for the sake of noise. There's some good music, but a lot of so-called music that you hear in restaurants, I don't know if it's the same here in North America, hard to find a restaurant without loud music. You just open the door and put your head in and you go out again. And a lot of that is for the sake of making noise. It's called music. There are some exceptions, of course. Some music can have a divine function too. In some rare cases it still has. Music that comes out of the stillness. That when you listen to music that came out of the stillness, whoever created it or whoever is playing it or singing it, it comes out of that state of consciousness, and then it assumes a form. and yet the form is fresh and new. It's come out of that, and the stillness still clings to it, has a fragrance. It still emanates that, even if it's sound. And that's the beauty of all art, true art. It reflects still that state of consciousness out of which it comes. And then you have a lot of pseudo art in this world where clever minds are trying to be even more clever and let's think of something new. What can we do here? Maybe we could put that here, or that could go there. That would look clever. And then, okay, let's do. And then you get, they call it art, but it's not, it lacks something. It's totally trapped in form. There's only manipulating old forms. Nothing new has come in. And nothing that can lead you back to the formless, which is the original reason for all art, is the sacred, to be a portal, an access point for the sacred, so that when you see it or experience it, you experience yourself. In it, you see yourself reflected, the formless reflected, shining through the form. That is why it is true art. Always there is more than what you see or hear. It's not just what you see or hear. There is more than that, and that shines through the form. And that is what can happen to you. What is happening to you, ultimately it's not everybody's purpose to create works of art. A few humans do that. That is their function, partly in this world, but much more importantly, is for you to become that work of art. Your whole life and your very being becomes transparent so that the formless can shine through. And that happens when you are no longer totally identified with the world of form. And that happens when you have access to the realm of stillness within yourself. And then something emanates through the form that is nothing to do with the form. It may emanate only as a silent emanation and not assume any form as such. And so that is sometimes the case with so-called, there have been very few in the past holy people who simply, in India, they've always existed. In any generation in India, there have always been a few holy men or women who never did anything. And that's very rare for the West. They say, well, what did they create? What did they do? And they never did anything. They just sat there. And the West says, what a useless existence. Come on, get a life, get a job. And some even, because people, when you're trapped in form, you misperceive it completely, because all you see there is a useless form sitting, and they say they are parasites on society. They allow themselves to be fed by other people. They bring them their food. They should work for a living, like myself. And that is when the mind that knows nothing but form looks at the form, it will totally misperceive it. And so that's the beauty that in India they've always recognized that, because they haven't completely lost touch. In fact, they may have gone at some point too far in the opposite direction, so that they lost interest in form because they went into being more. Now India is becoming Western. The more you read about India, you more see they're all into computers these days and cell phones. And that's fine too, but the question is, where's finding a balance? I was totally lost in, like most people, completely lost in form, and then a shift happened, and I lost the balance, and I became completely lost in the formless. We can't really be lost in the formless, it's just a way of putting it, because the formless is essentially who you are, and yet, from a normal perspective, it looked as if I had lost it. Because there was somebody who had a promising career and suddenly just sits around on park benches, not doing anything anymore, just being and tasting continuously the sweetness of being, of simply the beauty, the sweetness of being alive, the joy of simply being. And then looking upon the world and seeing it reflected in all life forms, reflected the joy of being in the trees and the birds, and even in the humans who are running around like mad, and knowing that in deep down there's also the very same being. And it's beautiful. And so from an external perspective, the ability to handle forms was gone, to manipulate the world of form was gone for a while, and then gradually had to re-establish itself so I could do again and of course be at the same time. And that is it is not the destiny of each one of you to move so deeply into being that you're no longer capable of handling the world of form around you. That happens occasionally, but it tends to happen more to those people those few who experience a dramatic shift from one to the other. And then for a while they're gone. There's of course the beautiful sutra of Buddha, Gate, Gate, gone, gone, gone to the farthest shore. And yet, it seems it is our destiny here, while we are still in form, to balance form and formless here. And that's why we are here. And for most of you, the transition to a new, and what is the new state of consciousness that's arising? It is the state that is balanced. The two dimensions, the manifested and the unmanifested, balanced in a human being. And that is such a radical transformation that when a certain number of humans live in that way, so they become what before was a work of art, you become the work of art. You become that which is transparent to the formless, the divine, that shines. And then that will change the entire world. The way what you experience as the human-made world will be changed completely. It is not necessary to speculate now, what is the world going to look like when enough humans live in the new consciousness? That's not important now. The important thing is for us to enter that new state. And then what that does to your story, who knows? How that changes the story, the way in which your life unfolds in time, what you do out here, how that affects where you live, what you do, and so on. You cannot predict, nor do you need to predict that. Are you going to become a great artist? Are you going to win Wimbledon? And of course, bear in mind that great artists and the tennis players, they are not enlightened masters. They have access to that which is greater than the limited human mind in the small field of their activity. And most of them, when they go back into normal life, away from where they have mastery, they are just as mad as everybody else. And sometimes even more mad. Because sometimes the mind-made entity gets in there and looks at what they did and it says, I did that. That was me. The greatest illusion. And then, of course, it feels very special. The ego then derives it identifies with whatever came out of the state of no ego and says, I did that. And then begins to believe what other people are saying about you and that you are the greatest. Because they project their images of specialness onto you. And then, oh, the great pop star, whatever. and the great pop stars also, they have when they compose their songs, or some of them, where there's even a glimpse of aliveness and freshness. Yes, there's something there. And then the personality, the person comes back the moment they step back from the act of creation or the performance. They step back and there's the old personality, and sometimes it's a dreadful burden for some ability that comes from the non-personal realm to be integrated into the personal, and they just can't do it. It's totally misperceived, just as the world misperceives it, and then they believe themselves to be very special. And there comes a huge conflict between power that comes out of the formless and the limited person that misinterprets it and claims something out of that. And the magic that comes from the formless realm into your life is what, when you look at our civilization, it seems to be gone completely, because a civilization is almost totally not sacred, it is profane, it is a dreary, burdensome structure that humans have created. When you look at the mainstream civilization, and so many humans, no matter what country you go to, they seem to be tired. They are weary. There's a weariness that they carry, and the civilization is grinding them down. Another day of dreary activity, of pointless running around. And even those who are still running around, they know deep down it's pointless. What is the point? And you ask the big executives in companies, where are you going? Why are you running around like mad? And they can't give you an answer except that, well, we are expanding. The organization is expanding. We are swallowing up other organizations. And that's our reason for being, is to grow, to get bigger. It's to accumulate more. And so it's all, this is why we are, and it's totally meaningless activity. And so there are many reasons why the entire civilization is reaching a point of collapse. And one is that the humans who are still sustaining it, they can't carry the burden of their self-created structures anymore. The over-complicated world, absurd complexity for the sake of complexity that they have created, and they cannot carry their own burden of their own creation anymore. Mind created, just a reflection of their state of consciousness, in which there is no gap in the stream of one form after another, one thought after another. The voice in the head that never stops speaking becomes a civilization that is obsessed with form, that is obsessed with things, and therefore knows nothing of that which you could say is the most important dimension of human existence, the sacred, the stillness, the formless, the divine, all these have become meaningless in our civilization. And yet, many humans are beginning to realize what's happening. And so there is in many a search for something else. And that number of humans is growing every day. And that's the beauty of it. So, each one of us here is part of the transformation of consciousness that's happening on the planet. It's not going to happen, it is happening. If it were not happening, you could not even sit here. It would be intolerable to sit here. And yet, there may be something in you, that's the old consciousness, that doesn't want to be here. You may occasionally feel that arises. There's something that doesn't even understand what is being said, that hears only the sound of the words, and says, it can't go to where the words point, so you get stuck with the form, the sound, stuck with the thought, and says, presence, stillness. Well, you haven't actually explained what you mean by stillness. So this is a good example where the word is only the pointer, and then you have to jump off the word. Stillness points to stillness. It's not something to be believed in. And the stillness, of course, is already in you. It is not something that we need to create here. We need to bring about by doing the right things, and then eventually we'll become still. Follow a certain course of a recipe. If you do A, B, C, and D, you will finally become still. That's very seductive. But you have given yourself something to do before you can be still, which means before you can find yourself and be yourself. That is the problem of every method, every spiritual method. Not that I will outright condemn all methods, but the danger with any method is that it gives you time. It says, okay, you will arrive and find yourself. Why not find yourself already? Why create something between yourself and yourself? So the stillness that is already at this moment in you fully. The stillness out of which the thoughts come. Every thought comes out and then goes back in. Sense perceptions get you a little closer to it. When you perceive, and do not label it, whatever you perceive, you just let it be. Then there is the perception, the form, and there is one could almost say this is a limited analogy, no analogies are that great, but could say there's the canvas on which the perception is painted. There's a background of spacious stillness. That's yourself. That's the consciousness that you are, formless, not the conditioned consciousness that is the forms in your mind, thoughts. They are there too. But simply being able to sense that which underlies whatever you perceive or think or feel. Gurdjieff put it in the Russian teacher who lived at the beginning of the 20th century, put it like he called it self-remembrance. And of course that can be misinterpreted as if you had to think about, okay, let me remember who I am. My name is such and such. No. He meant to remember, not even to remember, words are never right. To know the knower, to know who knows this, who in a dream, let's say you dream, and then you wake up and say it was only a dream, it was unreal. Of course it wasn't totally unreal, because something within the forms that arose in the dream must have been there to enable these forms to exist. There must have been a consciousness in which this dream unfolded. And so, in other words, there must have been a dreamer of the dream as the consciousness in which it happened. And that is the timeless and formless dimension without which forms would not exist. And so our normal existence is very much like a dream, because just like a dream, everything dissolves fairly quickly. Every situation, everything is, and even the seemingly solid reality that surrounds us is not really that solid. First of all, there's nothing solid, it just appears solid, it's just energy fields in motion, and they're not going to remain in that form for very long. If you could look more deeply, you could see everything is already dissolving. It's a temporary, it comes into form and dissolves. The bodies that are sitting here are already dissolving. Even this table, it looks, if we look in 200 years, it'll still look more or less the same. But if we could speed up on camera what happens to this room over a period of 3,000 years, which is very little on a global scale, then you would see that even all seemingly solid objects are crumbling, and within 1 minute you would see everything becoming dust and then disappearing. And it would be a shocking and liberating thing to watch a film like that shows you what is actually happening to the seemingly solid world around you. And deep down, it's a liberating thing when you see how short-lived every form is. Because what is it in you that sees that? The short-lived nature of all forms, and you witness that. That is the aware presence. From the stillness, you see that. And actually you become more still the more you see how short-lived every form is, and you don't run away from that fact. Just stay with. Let's see how important it is to face death in your life, which is everywhere, which is what our civilization is trying to hide continuously. There's no death. Don't never look at a dead body, because it just isn't done. So there are people who have never seen a dead body, and you certainly, if it's not a close relative, you would not be able to see a dead body, because the civilization needs to hide death, because it's the most threatening thing to somebody who is totally identified with the world of form. Death is the most dreadful thing, and you must not think about it or talk about it. And so, whenever you are faced with death, there is, and even just watching it. And when the table dissolves, that's death too. If you saw it over a period of 3,000 years and saw it crumbling, within a minute, the entire room and everything in it goes, oh. Or you would see a human being being born. Somebody showed me a clip, apparently it was from some ad from some country. It takes 1 minute. A baby is coming out of the womb and shoots out like a cannonball into the sky and screams all the time. But as the baby travels up into the sky, it already begins to grow and grows and goes higher and higher and finally reaches full maturity and then starts going downhill, is still screaming. and the closer, and then becoming an old man as he approaches the ground, hair is falling out, and finally the last scream, and he lands in the grave. and it says underneath, life is short. Now, whether the people who made that film knew that they were making a spiritual film, I don't know. I think they were selling beer or something like that. But that is deeply spiritual when you see how quickly everything dissolves and you don't run away from that fact. And that again, what I mentioned yesterday, the Old Testament prophet who said, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. To see that is liberating. Because now, if everything were permanent, it's the same as saying, if the entire world were blue, there would be no blue, because you couldn't differentiate it. The color blue wouldn't exist. Now, if everything were impermanent, you wouldn't even know it, because you only know it if there's something that's different. So I just give you this to consider and not to think about, to consider. There's something in you that recognizes the impermanent nature of all life forms. And that is the formless. And the more you realize the impermanence of all forms, the more you are aware of the formless in yourself. But you and the formless are ultimately one. So when you say you are aware of the formless, we're already making a little mistake that's created by language. What it really is that you are more fully yourself. You are more aware of yourself, not as two, but as one. You become more self-aware. Awareness becomes aware of itself. And there was a question here written by somebody who probably doesn't like public speaking, just this. Later we may have some more questions. In the now, sometimes I'm aware of expanding. What is this? It seems to be awareness itself. If I am aware of awareness, duality, which am I? Good question. I am aware, this is what it seems like when we talk about it. But that's not how it is. It's only when we put it into language, we formulate a sentence which has a subject and an object. But really, when you become aware of awareness, which really is the secret to a balanced human life, to become aware of awareness and then also the forms. But what does that mean? Who is becoming aware of awareness? The language that we use here creates the illusion of duality. So it would be much better if we rephrase that and we say, the awareness that I am becomes aware of itself. No duality. The awareness that is the essence of who I am becomes aware of itself. And that is a miraculous, beautiful, incredible thing. What traditionally has been called self-realization. Becoming aware, awareness becoming aware of itself. As simple stillness. But every word reduces it again to something that is far greater. And of course there's a sense of expansion because you're no longer trapped, as the questioner mentions, expanding. You're no longer trapped. Your consciousness is no longer trapped in the form. That's the incarnation. The incarnation of consciousness into form and the realization of consciousness as the formless. And so some spiritual traditions speak of reincarnating many times. And you say you reincarnate again and again until you wake up, until you realize who you are beyond form. And that is true. You are born again and again, but I want to make it not as something that I want you to believe in, but to make it true in your experience. And to make it true in your experience, all you need to look at is today. How you reincarnate today. Now, how does that happen? How do I reincarnate today? I thought it just happens once in a lifetime. You know the sticker that the born-again Christians have on their cars? It says, born-again Christians. And the Buddhists have on their car, born again and again and again. How do you reincarnate today? And how many times do you reincarnate today? Every time you lose yourself in a thought or an emotion or something that happens out there, which also, of course, you experience as thought and emotion. Let's say you lose yourself in a situation that says, this is important, you must deal with this. Okay, what's going on here? Let's deal with it. And then you lose yourself in the reactive pattern and in the mental interpretation. Oh, this is awful, you must do something about it, let's do. Or, whatever it is, you identify with a form. Every thought that arises in your mind that grips you completely, there's a sense of self in it. It's unconscious, of course. Your sense of self means your sense of identity gets mixed up with the form of that thought or the emotion. And so you're completely incarnated in the form that arises in your life. And so humans go through life not knowing, not realizing that every day they reincarnate many times, and they lose themselves continuously in forms. They react to the forms around them, and they're totally in the reaction. There is not an awareness in the background of, okay, this is what's going on. So there's no space, there's only form. There's no stillness, there's only noise. And that means being compulsively reincarnating every day, many times. And even while you sit alone in your room and you start thinking about, if you were talking out aloud, the voice in your head that you identify with, everybody would recognize it as insane. But But then on the other hand, I don't know, then what if I do that, then you'll go, But I wonder what happens if I go, Oh, that would be dreadful if that happened. I just hope that the... Oh no, I hadn't thought of that before. And you reincarnate continuously into some new thought form. And so, of course, that's why Buddhists talk about coming to the end of reincarnation simply means not losing yourself in form again and again and again. And it doesn't mean you reject all forms. Some spiritual traditions go a little bit far in their attempt to find the formless dimension. They say, don't even look at anything beautiful because it's not going to be around for very long. It's all dissolving already. Don't even look at the flower. Certainly don't, they tell the monks, never look at a beautiful woman. You must not look. And so they go... Because you would reincarnate in many ways, you lose yourself in the attraction, and that's dangerous. So a monk he can't hand a woman something because it's dangerous. He puts it on the table and then she picks it up, because otherwise there could be some indirect contact. Now the idea behind it may be a good one, that you mustn't lose yourself in form. And yet, to reject the world of form is perhaps, again, losing balance again in the other direction. Say, okay, all beauty is dust, because whatever I look upon is already dissolving. The flower that looks beautiful today, tomorrow will be gone with it. And so, in some traditions, the entire world of form is rejected completely. Now, occasionally, that seems to work. Mostly it doesn't. But here and there, some people realize this even within that tradition, but that probably doesn't have anything to do with the traditions. They would have realized even if they were sitting in an office. They were ready. So, it is always problematic if that which is a natural process of disidentification is forced into an artificially created structure. It may work. It works if there is a human being there who embodies the two dimensions, who embodies the awakened state. Then it can work. In many cases, there is no human being, there's only the tradition. And then, usually, it doesn't get you there. So, the form... not rejecting forms outright. I work with to see that in every form something is hiding that is one with the essence of who you are. And it is not just something you can think about. It is anything that you look upon and you are still enough, or listen to the bird, whatever it may be, anything that you can be with in stillness, so that you sense yourself as the still space in which that object or that being is perceived. Then you sense that essence that you sense yourself to be is also there in that being. And even in inanimate objects, even a table has being, has presence. Some people need to take acid for the first time to realize that the table is alive too. But this is not what I recommend here. All you need to be is present with it and truly be alert and still and then look. The moment you call it table, you are under the illusion that now you know what it is. You don't know at all. It is a mystery. It remains totally unknown and mysterious. Just because you put a label on it doesn't mean now you know. You just have a thought in your head or a sound comes out of your mouth and you say that's what it is. And then you cannot go deeper into it because you get stuck at the label. You hit the label and there you're stuck. Oh, that's a table. Okay, what's the next thing? You never can go deeper into anything. You only hit one label after another, okay? And therefore it's always the search, okay, because you only hit the surface of things, you always then immediately the mind says, okay, I've done that, I know what that is, now where's the next thing? There's this continuous looking for the next thing because you can never stay with one thing where the depth that is in everything reveals itself to you. And that's the restlessness of our civilization that always asks, what's next, what's next? And you already see even in relatively young children these days, that continuous need for the new stimulus. They can't sit still for a moment. They just, okay, because they are addicted to the next thing, some new mental stimulus, because they live in a civilization that is totally only on the surface of things, lacking completely in depth. So now you can bring in depth even into your perceptions of things. Perception is much closer to the unmanifested or to being than thought. Thought is far removed. It's an abstract. But for many people to become present, when they realize, oh, I'm lost. I'm lost in some problem, some world of problems. Where's the problem now? And they wake up. And the first thing they notice is sense perceptions around them. And they hadn't been aware of that at all because all their attention was in the thoughts. And suddenly they look at the floor, their hand, the table, the light. Oh. And in the looking, there's a stillness. In fact, the strange thing is, you cannot even look at anything without stillness because even the person who labels things compulsively, which is almost everybody, there's always a moment when they first, let's just talk for a moment about the visual sense, but it includes all sense perceptions. There's always a first moment when you first look at something, a tree, a flower, a table, anything. There is a 1 second or so in which there is stillness, and then the mind interprets it or labels it. But if you can catch yourself when you first look at something, there is a brief moment of non-labeling, otherwise you wouldn't even see it. And then it recedes almost, one could say, the sense perception immediately loses its sharpness and aliveness because after 1 or 2 seconds, a mental label replaces the aliveness that was there. Dead. And then you look at the next thing, or you listen to a bird, and there's a moment of pure listening. And then after 2 seconds, the mind says something. Oh, that must be a blackbird. Or what's the name of, I can't remember, gone. Or whatever the mind says about it. So if you can catch yourself, whenever something new enters your awareness, whether it's auditory or visual, tactile, smelling, tasting even, relatively undeveloped senses for contemporary humans, there you can be there and be conscious of that first moment when there's no labeling. There's the stillness, and the alertness. And if you become conscious of that, you may find that it becomes longer. You don't need to automatically label it. And so the stillness that is the background to sense perceptions becomes vaster. It's always vast, but you didn't know it. And so that is how another way in which the stillness in you expands, so to speak. Everything is so to speak about stillness. The stillness in you expands. And then more and more you move about your life, not just when you are passively perceiving, but also bringing it into activity, that state of consciousness, so to speak, that is stillness, flows into often also into what you do, so that you notice you can actually do things better if they are done in a state of still presence than if you are thinking what you want to achieve through this movement, where you want to get to in the next moment. No, you're just present with. So there's a stillness to what you perceive, and there's a stillness that flows into the action. And the action may be simple: walking across the room, opening a window, turning on the tap, feeling the water, listening to the water, looking out of the window. In the morning, you open the curtains. And why? It's simply a deep-seated habit to immediately call this day something and say, oh no, not another grey day. No, just let it be. And then there's immediately a depth to everything that wasn't there when you immediately put a label on it. So you stay with things a little longer, and that depth is your own depth, and the depths they're really one. The things of the world then are no longer experienced just as a surface phenomenon, but as alive, because the depth is the aliveness also in you. And so this is the shift that is happening to you, is that you bring in this so-called new consciousness into everyday situations. And you break the continuity of the story. Then intelligence comes in more and more. Also love, because the only way love can come into your life is through space, not through form. Love has no form. And again, in the egoic state, love gets entangled in form, so you think you need only this form you love, not realizing that true love is the recognition of the formless in the other, which is the recognition of yourself in the other. And that is inseparable from looking upon the other in stillness, without a form arising and saying, this is who she is or what she is. And if forms still arise in your mind, recognize it's only a thought. It's not who that human being is. And then, what beauty if you can recognize the formless in form. And first you can recognize it in natural things very easily, much more easily, because natural things are less challenging than humans. Humans were natural once, but now they have become whatever. The world of nature you approach first of all and relate through stillness and presence more and more. And then gradually you bring it into human relationships. easy with humans you meet for the first time. Let them be. And as you're listening, vital to be able to listen to another human. It doesn't mean that the words, all your attention is on the words when you listen. We're only listening almost as an analogy. There is a field of attention, of still attention that flows out towards that human being. One could say, you give him or her space. And then that person may be speaking, words arise in the space, but you are there as the spaciousness that allows the words to come. You are there as a field of aware presence. And then words may come out of your mouth suddenly, and that's very different from so-called normal human interaction that is all completely mind-dominated. To be still with another human being while you listen and sense yourself as the awareness while you listen. So some of your attention is on the words and some of your attention is, now with challenging humans, get into your body so that you can be present with your entire energy field. Every cell of the body is present as you listen. Then because humans can be very challenging. They want, because if they are dominated by mind, they want you to contribute to their mental structures, the drama, whatever it is. Their pain body may be active. Everybody here probably knows about pain body, which is another way of identifying with form. The old emotion that arises, slight trigger triggers pain body, a pain body episode. Pain body being the old stored up emotion from the past, human suffering, human pain that hasn't gone away, that is partly personal and partly collective, humanity. Ultimately, in the larger sense, is all just human pain. It's not ultimately personal at all. And that is a little entity, energetic entity that lives in you, sometimes dormant and sometimes active. And sometimes half dormant, half asleep, with one eye open, waiting for an opportunity, just for a trigger, so that it can come up. And the trigger could be a remark your partner makes. Are you accusing me of being... What? No, I didn't say that. Yes, you did. And then we start. The drama, that awakens our partner's pain body, and that's supposed to happen. They feed each other. You totally reincarnate into old pain. You live it. It lives through you. Not knowing that you are going through another reincarnation. And you may be a Buddhist and having thoughts in your head that you want to arrive at the end of the cycle of reincarnations, and that's some abstract edifice in your mind, and you don't know that while you're fighting with your wife, you are reincarnating at this very moment. And then I must get back to my meditation. I don't meditate an hour a day, I'll have to reincarnate again and again and again. While you're doing it now. Oh. So this is one of the most frequent ways in which people reincarnate, is into the old emotion that wants to feed on the experience of more pain. And it pretends to be you. You identify with it, it occupies your entire space. And you feed on the other person's reaction. And you love it. When I say you, I mean the pain body. At that moment there's a mistaking you. the pain body for who you are. That's reincarnation. And then finally it subsides. And then the next episode will be in a week's time, just like the soap operas. Or it will feed on your mind. If you have no partner, it will feed on your thinking. How dreadful my life is. What he did to me, she did to me, they did to me. The world, politicians, people, whatever the mind can think of that's a negative thought, the pain body loves it. That is the pain body is the addiction to negativity that humans carry. And it's a little entity, an energy form. And all that is required is for you to see it, to recognize it. Then you don't reincarnate into it anymore. And even if you were reincarnated, it is possible in the middle of negative thinking or in the middle of a drama with your spouse to suddenly know what's happening. That means some of your consciousness has stepped out of the form and is there as pure awareness. Before it was totally trapped in the form. And then when you suddenly see what's happening, that means what's happened there, some consciousness has stepped out of the incarnation and is there as pure consciousness watching. And there you are, the angry entity screaming, oh, look at that. And then it can't go on for that much longer, because when there's awareness there, presence, which is simply the still watcher, then it can't very well renew itself much longer, because it needs your unawareness, it needs your complete identification with it to really renew itself. So then it quickly subsides. It goes, Okay. Well, that was good. At least I woke up in the middle of it. Sometimes you wake up afterwards. There it was. Too late. But it's not really too late, because at least I'm awake now. Next time maybe I can catch it a little earlier. And then next time it comes, oh, there it is. And you can sometimes see how a little event can be used as an excuse by the pain body. Just a tiny thing going wrong. Somebody slams the door in your face. And there's a reaction far greater than the relatively insignificant event. And that's because the pain body was waiting for something. So shining the light of attention, of consciousness on it is all that's needed. Then you don't reincarnate completely into it every time and renew the old cycle. It's always the same. Always the same. If you're not present, in 30 years' time, you'll still have the same episodes with your wife or husband. Or it may be a new wife and a new husband, but it'll be the same. And the strange thing is, you look for somebody, saying you get a divorce finally. I can't live with this pain body anymore. I mean the one that I live with. You still have your own. And so you get divorced and say, okay, now my next husband or wife, I'm going to choose somebody who doesn't have a pain body, who is conscious. And then you meet somebody who looks conscious. They've done spiritual work for 25 years. And then you start living together, and within about 4 weeks, you will encounter an aspect to that person that wasn't supposed to be there. So that's the challenge of the pain body, whether you are in a relationship or not, it'll be there. Relationships are a good opportunity because that's the favorite playground of pain body renewal. But if the pain body doesn't have the relationship, it'll just use your mind. That works too. So watch for that, because there's a momentum there that's very strong, because there's such a huge amount of human pain, collective human pain on this planet, built up over many, many thousands of years. And really, all that your pain body is, or that looks personal, it's really human pain. Although something in your so-called personal life may have added to it, but really it is basically impersonal. Just as the movement of thought is basically impersonal. The emotions are human emotions. The thoughts are all thoughts that are being thought by the collective human mind. And people think that's me. But it is impersonal. It's just when you identify it, it gives the illusion that of being personal, of being a person there. You are being thought by the collective mind. And so, well, where is the personal then? Well, the strange thing is that stillness isn't personal either. Presence, stillness, is not personal. And yet it is essentially the beingness that you are. But it's not personal. Personal means a little thing that there's me and the others. So ultimately there's nothing personal, neither the unconsciousness that identifies with forms, nor when the consciousness arises is not personal either. And yet the essence of who you are, the I am, that is nothing to do with person. But it gets mixed up with the personal, the forms that the person identifies with, that make up the person. As you know, person is the word comes from Latin. It means persona, the mask that you wear, and that these are the roles that you play when you interact with other humans, as long as you're identified with mind and emotion. You play the roles that are personal. You play the script in your mind, the conditioning of your mind, again and again and again, born again and again and again, until you've had enough. And then you're fed up with the suffering that entails. And the readiness comes to step out of that. That's the end of reincarnation. Before we have a few questions, there may not be any questions left. That would be good too. Can you listen to the sound of the bell at the same time as you're aware of the awareness that is listening? In other words, aware of yourself as the presence in which the sound happens. And then all that's left is spaciousness, presence. Form and formless. So even while you listen to the form, which is the sound, follow the sound as it slowly dies down into formlessness. That is death too. When the sound slowly dies down, when I ring this bell again, after the Royal Air Force has passed, follow the sound until it disappears. That means the sound dies. Death means a form is dissolving, dissolves. And then what's left is formless consciousness. You can do the same with your breath. It's an old meditation method. The simplest one of the simplest, doesn't really give you time to observe your breath. The Buddha recommended that. It's perhaps the most direct meditation method because it doesn't give you time. Unless the meditator comes in as a conceptual identity and says, I must get better at observing my breath. When you observe how your breath moves out, the end of the out-breath is also a little death. And there's a moment of stillness. Any ending is helpful in that way, because any ending is the ending of any form, and it's always some kind of death. When you accept it fully, it's an opening into the formless. Even the ending of our little retreat can be like that, because that too is a form, and you could say, oh, what a pity, this form is dissolving, and you want to hang on to the form, a recipe for unhappiness, not realizing that the very reason why this gathering is meaningful is that it takes you beyond form. So the more you welcome all the endings in your life, goodbye, form is going, the more the formless is there in your life. The egoic entity works the opposite way. It hates, it wants to think through, oh no, I want to keep this. But it's going, gone. Everything. If you're old enough that you can see the death of this physical form approaching, That can be very beautiful too, to feel, to accept that, but not as a thought, thinking, oh, I'm going to die soon. No, let it push you into being present. Just that. If any questions arise, please ask one person there. I think the microphone will travel to you.
You use a lot of humor a lot of laughter in your presentation, and there appears to be a lot of laughter in you. I have this sense that once the humorous thing is said and the laughter begins, that too is a porthole into presence. Can you speak about that?
The humor arises spontaneously when you look at, really, whenever this humor arises, we are looking at the world of form and see that the normal existence, which is the identification with form, is a form of madness. And when you see it in your own life, the seeing is free. In that moment of freedom from that old conditioned form, there is the spontaneous relaxation, and that produces the laughter. So it's enormously liberating. The more you laugh at the world of form, not in a malicious way, but in a free way, to see the forms do not, they pretend, all the forms pretend that they are deadly serious. The world wants to be taken really, every situation says, I'm so serious. And if you have no inner spaciousness, then indeed every situation is dreadfully serious. And so the absolute seriousness of the world of form disappears when you are rooted in the formless, and that means laughter arises more frequently, even in relatively unlikely situations, and does not mean that you have no empathy or compassion. It's sometimes when I used to see people individually, they would come to me, and usually they begin by telling their story. At that time I just let them, still, that's okay, tell me the story. And sometimes while they were telling, and sometimes it was a very unhappy story, very unhappy. And sometimes while I was listening, there was a smile on my face, and I don't know how it got there. And sometimes the people who were telling suddenly stopped and said, "What are you smiling about? Are you laughing at me?" No, and then I found it hard to explain. There was a time when I didn't have really many words to explain. So I found it hard to explain why the smile was there, not smiling at anything they said, smiling because I recognized, both within myself and within them, underneath the story, I recognized the dimension in which that story is relatively meaningless. I recognized that underneath the story you are absolutely fine. I recognize the dimension in you where you are was never touched by the unhappy story, who you are. And because I recognized that, the smile came. And so, but quite a few times people got angry because they thought I was smiling at their story or at them. It wasn't taken all that seriously anymore. Just as my own story lost its seriousness. It continued in some way, playing itself out, but it wasn't serious business anymore. It doesn't mean that you don't honor the world of form. It doesn't mean that you have become callous towards things. No, not at all. There is, you still here, as this form identity, you still carry a form also, so you can empathize with the suffering that arises in anyone who is totally identified with form. And yet that is one aspect of compassion, that you know full well what it means to be trapped in form is suffering. And I've been through it, I know the suffering. So there's the empathy on the level of form of suffering, but there's also the recognition of that which is already beyond suffering. In me, in you, it's one. And there come the two aspects of compassion. On the one hand, we share being trapped in this form, seemingly. On the other hand, we also share the timeless and formless dimension of existence, where we are already free, and you bring the two together, and that's true compassion. Because true compassion doesn't just mean you weep when the other person weeps, you weep also. You may weep, but underneath the weeping, there's joy. The joy that knows of the formless, that knows that you are in your essence indestructible, not as an abstract idea, but as a feeling realization, so to speak. So humor is a wonderful thing, and I'm sure that Jesus and other teachers all had a lot of humor too, all the teachers did, and just the disciples later on said, oh, we mustn't put that joke in, that doesn't look serious enough. Beware of any spiritual teacher who is deadly serious, because even the Zen masters who look dreadfully serious, they only look like that. There's an enormous amount of humor inside them that's hidden in all the Zen stories and the way they deal with people. So they just look like that. But if you look into their eyes, or if you see a drawing done by a great artist of a Zen master, you see underneath their so perhaps frightening demeanor, there is a softness also, and there's a gentle smile hidden somewhere there. And then, of course, you have the beautiful image. Traditionally, all Buddha images have a slight smile. This is the Buddha smile, a very slight hint of a smile that comes with knowing yourself, knowing the essence of being. And then you have the images influenced by Taoism in China of the fat Buddha. They are wonderful. There's this man with a huge belly, toothless in many cases, or just one tooth left, and his belly is huge, and he's continuously laughing. And many people have that at home in China and nowadays in the West also, and it's wonderful to see whenever you think you have a problem, just look at him and he go. And he is laughing not at you, he's laughing not because he despises the world or is callous towards human suffering, he's laughing because he's rooted within in the formless. And so it's a wonderful image. You can also practice a laughing meditation. That's I haven't done that yet. And that frees up a lot of rigid structures inside. But here the laughing happens spontaneously, and it's wonderful. Okay, one there, and then we go there. Okay. Oh.
Thank you. Can a fool realize his enlightenment?
Thank you. Can a form realize...
A fool.
A fool?
Silly person.
Oh, thank you. Wonderful question. There are some wonderful images. Fool is a very ancient mythological figure. The tarot card of the fool and so on. Now, by fool, let's say we mean someone whose mental capacities are undeveloped. I would say somebody who is not trapped in the usual structures of compulsive thinking, not because he or she has transcended compulsive thinking, but has not arrived at compulsive thinking. And in that sense, that human being is already enlightened because he has not, it's not the enlightenment that we are addressing here, but that state of not yet being trapped in thought has many similarities with the enlightened state. One could say he doesn't need enlightenment because in his own way he already is enlightened. In modern contemporary mythology, which is films, there's a beautiful example of that in the figure of Forrest Gump, the film. Somebody whose mental capacities are undeveloped, but who lives in many ways just like an enlightened person would live. First of all, he doesn't have an ego. Everything he needs naturally comes to him. His life unfolds naturally. He doesn't struggle for anything. Everything comes at the right moment. And he even does great things, but never says, I did that, because the I hasn't arisen yet. He has to go to Vietnam, and even there wherever he goes, he is a force for good. Even when he has to go to the war in Vietnam, he saves many people, and he's a great hero. And he doesn't look at himself as a great hero because he doesn't have a mental image of myself having done that. He just explains, that's what happened. I did that, and so what? And so, in many ways, he is already enlightened, and you can say he doesn't need enlightenment because he is already there. For us, we can't go back there. He doesn't really need to go through thinking. He's fine. It seems to be the destiny of some humans to be connected, and there may be a few remaining civilizations, remnants of ancient civilizations, where humans live in oneness with nature and oneness with each other, and they don't need the Buddha. They already, just as an animal, there are some dogs or cats that I sometimes meet. In some cases they have suffered a lot, or they are very old, and they reached the enlightenment of the dog or cat being. The old cat who cannot be bothered anymore with catching birds, because the cat knows it's pointless anyway, they're too old, and so they go around and they're just completely there. And the old dog, there are beings who seem to have completely fulfilled the purpose of their existence in that form, and have found the connectedness with the formless within. The form has fulfilled its purpose, and the connectedness is there. It is not our destiny to return. We have been, or are, or most of us halfway, stuck in the human mind. So there's no way of going back. We cannot become fools again. And yet, when you go beyond thinking, from the point of view of mind, it often appears that you no longer know anything. So in that way, we also become fools from the point of view of conceptual thought. And there are many similarities with the way that an enlightened person lives who has transcended thought, means is no longer trapped in thinking, to somebody who has not yet gone through the evolutionary stage of being trapped in thinking. Didn't have to. For some reason, consciousness flowered there, through that form. And that's beautiful. For us, it's transcending thought and then becoming a fool again. Yes, one could say, and yet we don't become Forrest Gump. There is a knowing that comes when you have transcended thought, there is an awareness that wasn't there before in the natural state. It's a regaining of the natural state, but the regaining of the natural state that also all ancient civilizations speak of, the myth of the golden age that exists in India, in almost every civilization. You have the myth that there was a time when humans lived in peace and happily. The world was a kind of paradise. You have the same myth expressed in the beginning of the Bible. So there's an ancient truth there. There's a natural state that humans lost. Those humans who didn't lose it they are fine. But it is the destiny, the evolutionary destiny of consciousness is for humans to lose it and then to regain it. And that's where we are. And so, in some ways, you will look to humans who are still trapped in thinking when you live aligned to the present moment, don't compulsively label things, are no longer a walking story. You become quite simple. The need to be special falls away. You become very ordinary, because you don't need to project a sense of specialness anymore and attempt to find your identity in there, because you are in touch with the preciousness that is the essence of you are. So you don't need to seek a specialness in form anymore. So what a freedom that comes to us now of not needing to be special anymore to get some sense of who you are, to become ordinary. You have that beautifully expressed in the Taoist sages. The whole Tao Te Ching, the Chinese Book of Wisdom, is all an expression of ordinariness, to be ordinary, not to project yourself and needing to be someone, but happy to be no one. And that looks quite foolish from the point of view of our civilization. And people may look upon you as nobody, and that's wonderful. The only regret, it's not really regret, I have about the power of now that became so well known, and with it the being that gave it birth, no more, just is the projection of specialness, whereas there was such beauty in being totally ordinary, and nobody doubted that I was ordinary. Well, a few people said, "Oh, you must go and see him. He's so ordinary." Just to live with the present moment, see nothing could be more ordinary than just to live aligned with whatever is here now. That's all you ever have to do. It's pretty ordinary. Just this. The famous Zen saying, chopping wood, carrying water. It's expressed in that. It's a very profound Zen saying. This is meant to encapsulate the whole of Zen existence. Chopping wood, carrying water. Two of the most ordinary activities at that time when people did that. In our case, it will be something else. Most people, don't chop wood. Well, perhaps here some people still do. It is beautiful to be just that. Whatever you happen to be doing at this moment, there's no more than this moment, chopping wood. Carrying water. Just that. Peace. Aliveness. No interference of mind that says, how many more weeks or years do I have to chop this wood? If I don't do something now, I'll still be stuck here in 10 years' time chopping wood. The illusion of time is back here, but only on the external, not in here. On the external level, the clock keeps ticking, tick, tick, or whatever modern clocks do. This is not the end, there is no end, but this is not the end even on the level of form. After our little break, I will meet with you again here in about 30 so-called minutes. And we will sit together just in silence for a little while. Unless something else happens. Thank you.